to the Sunday service for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Pensacola. Our congregation reflects an area along the Florida Panhandle and the Alabama Gulf Coast, and in today's world, from anywhere that you choose to join us. Welcome. I am Reverend Alice Silty, and it is my honor and pleasure to serve this congregation as minister, a congregation whose mission is to celebrate diversity, strive for justice, and inspire love. If you would like to learn more about our congregation, please feel free to reach out. I would love to talk with you. It's good to be together today.
Our chalice lighting words today come from Orlando Brugnola. Flame, friend of our most ancient ancestors, you burn always, in the unique worth of each person, in the imagination, in the turning of the heart to sorrow or joy.
Affirmation of Hope by Loretta Williams. We, bearers of the dream, affirm that a new vision of hope is emerging. We pledge to work for that community in which justice will actively present. Yet we know that in this struggle is the hope for the future. We affirm that we are co-creators of the future, not passive pawns, and we stand united in affirmation of our hope and vision of a just and inclusive society. We affirm the unity of all persons. We affirm the brotherhood and sisterhood that allows us to touch upon each other's humanity. We affirm a unity that opens our eyes, ears, and hearts to see the different but common forms of oppression, suffering, and pain. Yet, we are one in the image of God. We celebrate our hopes for human unity within ourselves and within the gathered community, we will discover the strength not to hide in indifference. Among that hope, publicly expressed, energizes and enables us to move forward together. Together, we pledge action to transcend barriers, be they racial, political, economic, social, or religious. We pledge to make our tomorrows become our todays.
Morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society. And it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. And I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
There is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down when the poor cry out for shelter and bread. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down. Remember, our hearts can make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let your love roll down like a mighty stream. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down. They can kill the prophet, but the dream lives on. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream.
I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
The candles you see represent the joys and sorrows among us, and today we especially think about Carol Trotter, who died on Wednesday while in Tampa in a hospital after she went there over the Christmas holidays to visit her daughter and her daughter's family. I light a special candle today for Carol as we think about the loss being shared by her daughter Christine, her grandson Mason Deegan, and Christine's partner Raymond Deegan, also Carol's younger brother Larry Guzman, who are all dealing with this very, very sad loss. Christine is extremely grateful that the family was able to visit with Carol on Tuesday. Due to the COVID restrictions, it's been very difficult to have family gathered during this sad time. One of the candles, as always, burns for those joys and sorrows that remain in our hearts, yet unspoken.
Please join me in reciting our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
This is the third Sunday in the 30 Days of Love, celebrating Side with Love with our Unitarian Universalist Association. This celebration runs from approximately Martin Luther King Jr. Day through February 14th, Valentine's Day. It's an opportunity to lift up the ways Unitarian Universalists and many of our partner organizations are building and organizing by taking bold, courageous action for intersectional racial justice. This week, we are pleased to be able to welcome Cheryl Howard, President of the African American Heritage Society Incorporated here in Pensacola, to share some of the work that they are doing to educate toward racial justice. The theme for this third week of 30 Days of Love is educating for liberation. So we are delighted to have Cheryl here to speak on behalf of the African American Heritage Society.
Good morning, pastor and congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Pensacola. Thank you for inviting me today to make a presentation before you. I'm Cheryl Howard, and I'm here as the president of the African American Heritage Society Incorporated. We are a state-recognized 501c3 organization and also a West Florida United Way certified partner agency. The African American Heritage Society was founded September 12, 1990, and has operated continuously with vision and purpose for 31 years. We're located in the heart of the historical district at 200 Church Street, and we have been there since 2000. Prior to that, from 1990 to 2000, we were located at the Pensacola Cultural Center, also in the historical district across the street from the T.T. Whitworth Museum. Our mission is to preserve, promote, educate, and integrate African American heritage, history, culture, and diversity in Pensacola and the greater Gulf Coast region, and to continue to lead the area in supporting and promoting cultural tourism and social justice through education and the humanities. Through quality programming, the African American Heritage Society has offered retrospective exhibits in the visual arts and humanities, performing arts programs, cultural festivals, as well as educational lectures, all highlighting a broad spectrum of the African American experience, its unique and creative influences, and contributions to American life. For our 30th season, we wanted to find a way to provide a more complete history of the African American experience in America, as we are fully American. We say in all of our lectures and events that American history and African American history are the same. It took place on the same soil, and events and the events in the lives of all of the inhabitants occurred in conjunction with the birth and development of this nation. Yet somehow a large portion of the history is not taught in the traditional way within a classroom setting. Much of what American citizens know or believe that they know has been passed down within their families, and depending upon the ancestral history, may or may not be accurate. We believe that this lack of knowledge is at the root of many of the divisions that our country has been plagued with for so long. Therefore, when we were presented with the opportunity to further curate an exhibit that had been initially created by the New York Historical Society, we were elated. The initial exhibit was to explore African American history during the age of Jim Crow, which began post-slavery and after the short period of time that we consider to be a period of almost true freedom, more commonly known as the period of Reconstruction. That period was a brief 12 years, and then we were ushered into the period of Jim Crow, which is pretty much where the country has remained more or less in various forms ever since. Recognizing that most of the history that is embraced during Black History Month in February is usually focused primarily on the civil rights movement and great human beings such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. While we honor those wonderful legends and leaders within the civil rights movement, we believe that it's important to provide a more broad-based training or education, if you will, about the history of America and the African American experience, particularly slavery and the time periods before and after that. So with the blessing of the historic University of West Florida Historic Trust, with whom we are partners, and the New York Historical Society, we were able to expand the initial 8-panel exhibit to include the period predating the arrival of enslaved people to America, starting with the origins on the continent of Africa. And then we move forward from there through the Middle Passage to the transatlantic slave trade and go all through all of the various periods of our time here in America up to the present time. We believe that an exhibit such as this is long overdue because the majority of our exhibits are based on short periods of time. It is unfortunate that it took the death of a human being, George Floyd, and the overlapping presence of a deadly pandemic to bring the world's attention to social injustices that have been endured by millions of human beings for the crime of having been born with melanin in our skin. We are often taught that the body is merely the housing for the soul. I can't imagine that our souls would be very different, as I imagine it to be a light that shines within us all. Yet prior to this social justice awakening, so many lights were dimmed or extinguished by having been deemed not worthy because of the outer shell. Our exhibit provides the historical facts with pictures for those who are more visual and words, as well as all of the exhibits are documented as well with the historical basis, the research, so that one can continue their own research additionally should they choose to do so. So I'd like to invite you to enjoy, to the extent that you can, the exhibit that will be presented next. I want to also invite you, recognizing that we are in a pandemic, to consider visiting Voices of Pensacola to see the exhibit live. I would recommend that you call ahead to make sure that it is not a day in which we have an inordinate number of people waiting in line. We have been very successful with keeping the numbers within Voices down to 2 or 3 people as they move through the exhibit. Also, for those interested and who are within a certain age group, we are offering small exhibits as well, small tour groups to see the exhibit as well. And that, of course, is based upon an appointment. So please feel free to give us a call. Our website is aahspensacola.org. So without further ado, I'd like to once again thank you so very much for inviting me to tell you a little bit about the African American Heritage Society and to tell you about our 30th season exhibit that we are so pleased to be a part of and to have had the opportunity to co-curate, and to say thank you for your anticipated generosity. Whatever resources that you provide, I assure you, will be put to good use. Unfortunately, interest in African American history, or the lives even of currently of African American people, tend to go in and out of fashion, and it waxes and wanes. So we have good years and we have not so great years. So we hope that this time this is not just a moment, but that it is in fact a movement, and that we will be moving forward as we seek social justice for all of mankind without any shame to those who may be the descendants of slave owners, and absolutely no shame to those who are the descendants of enslaved people. We are all basically concerned about understanding and hoping that that understanding will lead to better relationships for all of us as we share this great earth. Thank you. So I'd like to invite you to walk along with me as I just point out the various panels that make up this 24-panel exhibit. And in order to see it more closely, you are invited to tour the exhibit live at Voices of Pensacola, directly across the street from Seville Quarter. We have an excellent executive assistant, there, Francine, who gives most of the tours, and she is requested because she does such an amazing job. So I would ask you to please consider a small tour group, even after hours, if you're concerned about being in a public space with the COVID. But I can tell you that we have been very careful and only allowing 2 to 3 people at a time. So we have not had any incidences as of yet, and hope that we will not, but we will certainly accommodate you. One of the reasons that we're pleased to have this opportunity is that if we're able to secure additional funding, we'd like to expand the days that we're able to provide private tours outside of the public viewing time. But that, of course, calls for additional funding for staff. So please follow along with me now. I won't have a chance to give a full dissertation about each of the panels, but I can at least show you what they look like, and so that you can have a preview of what you will see if you are able to visit us at Voices. Thank you very much. This is our introductory panel here. This one explains the relationship between our exhibit and the university. This is the panel that I talked about, which starts the discussion of African American people still on the continent of Africa, and to tell what we were doing before being enslaved and brought to America and the other parts of the Americas and Europe. This panel depicts the Middle Passage, which was an arduous journey. As you can see, these are human beings laid next to each other, backed on their sides, in chains all the way around, and they traveled this way for approximately 3 to 4 months. Those that lived, many died along the way. This panel discusses the transatlantic transportation and also how it was determined where various slaves would be taken, whether or not they would be taken to North America, where more cotton and rice was grown, or if they would be taken to the West Indies, where sugar was refined and cultivated. The next one talks about the fact that slavery existed in all 13 colonies before we were America, when we were the colonies. It existed from New England all the way down to Georgia. This talks about the many billions of dollars that the free labor provided by slaves made for the South. The History Channel has opined that if the Confederacy had been its own separate nation, it would have ranked as the fourth richest in the world at the start of the Civil War. And because we are in the South, and many of us are very fond of the movie Gone with the Wind, it tells a story that is not the complete story, and so we have titled this one Not a Gone with the Wind Experience. Many believed that slavery and the physical punishment was visited only upon the male slaves, but as you can see, many females were beaten and treated in the same fashion, as well as children. This depicts the Civil War, talks about the life of Mr. Smith, and it starts when he's a runaway from slavery and known by the Union soldiers as contraband. And then it shows him signing up for the military service. And then at the end of the Civil War, returning home, not as a complete person in the sense of his body, having lost a leg, fighting for his own freedom. And then again, this one talks about the Dred Scott decision and how Dred Scott had sued for freedom from slavery, and the court, the United States Supreme Court in 1857, found that he and his wife were in fact not to be freed, that they were not considered to be human beings entitled to such freedom. This is a poem that was written by Langston Hughes in 1936. And it is so interesting how so many individuals feel that the same things that he spoke of then apply today, when there's the issue of democracy and the Jim Crow and the feeling of being left out and not having an opportunity to fully compete and be a member of American society. While meanwhile, we did participate and have participated in every war since the Civil War. And then we talk about the period of Reconstruction that started in 1865. This is the period that I spoke of that really spanned approximately 12 years, and that was the period of time in which there was an actual attempt to integrate African Americans into the nation and into the world in terms of having access to all of the same rights as any other citizen. And that period, as I mentioned, was very short-lived. We'll talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. During slavery, it was not uncommon for children to be separated from their parents from birth, or at age 2 or 4, 10, 15, whatever, whenever it was deemed necessary or desirable to sell a person from their parent. Often the children were sold from their mothers as a wedding gift, for example, to the slave masters' children to help them start their plantation and so on. And so here, even after the Emancipation Proclamation, you can see that many slaves were still unable, although they were technically free, they were unable to live because they basically were released from slavery, enslavement, with no money, no land, only the clothes that they were wearing, and nothing else. So the question became, how free are you if you really are not able to provide for yourself and your family? Also, as I mentioned before, it says 32 years in search of a wife, tells the story of a gentleman whose wife had been sold away from he and their children. And at the end of slavery, after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, he spent 32 years looking for his wife. And when he and his adult children by then found her, they talked about the big reunion that they had and how they wept for joy. And here the priorities of freedom. Once people were freed, what things were important to them. Voting was certainly an issue. Democracy and equality, the pursuit of happiness, liberty, life, all of these things were important. And then we talk about how at one point during that 12-year Reconstruction period, when everyone was able to participate equally with democracy, many individuals went on to become senators, representatives in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. But that ended between 1870 and 1877 after an agreement between the North and the South and their political representatives, which then turned back the clock and basically restored the same order, and the same people were assigned back to the plantations and the people who had previously owned them without protection of the federal government. And then we see violence anew, and then the advent again of lynching and rioting, massacring of African American people. It became a phenomena that people would take pictures of the lynched individual and have them put on postcards and mail them all around the country to their relatives to show what sort of recreation they had had on Sunday after church. And then we move to the period of Jim Crow, which is basically, I consider to be essentially the federalized legal state of a caste system, essentially, where it is perfectly okay for large segments of the population to be excluded from having any of the rights of any other person, once again, because of melanin in the skin. And then those who could move from the South, seeking to flee this caste system by going north, did do so. And when they arrived in the North, unfortunately, a different form of Jim Crow awaited them there. But to some extent, it was a little less frightening because at least they were not as likely to at least be lynched. So it gave them some sense of satisfaction that they could at least live, although in many cases, in certain parts of the country, that was not necessarily true. But as you can see, the South lost a great many African American people during the first Great Migration from 1910 to 1940, and again during the second migration from 1940 to 1970. People looking for a better life, which led then to the building of Black Harlem. Many people are not aware that Harlem was not always a place of African Americans. It gradually became so because this gentleman, Philip Payton, began to purchase real estate there so that the large numbers of African Americans moving to Harlem could find safe housing. And so people came there from the South and the Caribbean, just looking for a safe place to live and work and raise their families. And then we have the challenging Jim Crow, which led to sort of has been ongoing, but really met its stride with the civil rights movement. And I wonder sometimes when I see history like this that was put out by the Dallas County Citizens Council of Selma, Alabama, asking its white citizens, "What have I personally done to maintain segregation?" And it goes through and talks about the importance of every white person to do whatever it can to basically disenfranchise people of color. And then we have the new Jim Crow that we're living under now, which is various forms of social injustice, not the least of which is the mass incarceration in private prisons. Here in this area, we have the issue of direct file as well. And so this is not our final slide, but it's the final one that's listed here right now, and it's the Black Lives Matter, an affirmation of that fact, with a picture, of course, of George Floyd. And we have a final slide, but it isn't here today. We're doing some tweaking and adjusting. So when you come in to tour, by that time, I'm hopeful that you will have the opportunity to see the final slide. So I think I am more than out of time now. I hope that this has been enlightening. I hope that you will be able to visit us either on our website, AA, that's like African American, AAHSpensacola.org, to follow along with our lecture series, our book club series, as well as a quarterly music accompaniment and lectures to further textualize this exhibit and tell you more about what we are trying to do to help with no blame to those who might be the descendants of slave owners, and no shame for those who are the descendants of enslaved people, but just seeking to inform and to educate and to provide facts and information so that we can move forward, hopefully, in a more united way for the rest of the time that we inhabit this earth. Thank you so much again.
Good morning. In January, we have 5 Sundays, and as is our custom at UUCP, we donate the 5th Sunday offering to a nonprofit within the community. This month, we're donating to the African American Heritage Society, a 501c3 founded in 1990. For 30 years, they've worked to preserve, promote, educate, and integrate African American history, heritage, culture, and diversity in the Pensacola and the greater Gulf Coast region. We are asking you to donate generously to the African American Heritage Society.
Our closing words come from William G. Sinkford, past president of the UUA. Only begun. Spirit of life and love, dear God of all nations, there is so much work left to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we see the hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice. That is our dream. Amen.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chasing rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat of our weary feet, come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the